Hello guys, this is Chetan Mehta from Skill Cubator. Today's session is in continuation with part A, which was on business process diagram. In that, the first session we talked about what exactly is a business process diagram, what's the importance of it, some of the basic notations. So in today's session, we'll talk about how to create a process model using a tool called Microsoft Visio. So this is more like a hands-on demonstration on creating a process model. So as you can see on this slide, we have some basic notations. Some people also call it icon symbols, but try to use this term called notation. So notations are the ones you will be using to capture your process model. So the first one is used for start and end events. The second one is your pool. Within the pool, you will have swim lanes. So basically your pool is holding the process, whereas your swim lane is assigned to each of the process participants. The next one is used for capturing any activities or any tasks that are done by the process participants. So it is generally shown as either rounded rectangles or regular rectangles. The next one is the gateway. So gateway is used for validating any policies, procedures, any of your business rules, right? So whenever you have multiple outcomes, you can use this gateway. And the last one is your sequence flow, which is basically connecting your two notations in your process flow. So the arrow indicates in which direction the control of your flow is going. So using these some basic notations will create a process model. Of course, there are many notations, additional notations which you can use, but those will be more useful when you are trying to create a very complex scenario or you are doing some advanced modeling. But in a day-to-day scenario, these notations should be good enough for any business analyst to create their process flows. So before we go to the tool, let's go over the scenario we are trying to model. So here we have customer who fills out the form. Then the customer will submit the form. It goes to the order processing clerk where he or she will check the form. If the form is complete, then we go to step 6. If it's incomplete, it's resent back to the customer for him or her to update the form and again resubmit. Right, so there's a loop here. Now, if the form is complete, the order processing clerk will notify the bank to debit the payment. Step 7, the bank will process the payment. Now here I have only one scenario, what we call the happy path. That means the bank is able to process the payment successfully. Now what happens if the bank is unable to process the payment, right? So what do we do in that case? So we can also model that scenario when we are creating the process flow. Step 8, once the payment is successfully made, the warehouse personnel will pick the item, and step 9, he or she will conduct a quality check. If the item is found to be okay, then we go to step 10. Otherwise, if the item is found defective, during the quality check, the warehouse personnel will go and pick another item and repeat the quality check. Right, so again, we have a loop here. Step 10, once the quality check is good, once the item qualifies, it passed that check, we go to step 10 where the warehouse personnel will pack the item. Step 11, the item is shipped and delivered to the customer. And step 12, which is where we will complete the process. So process ends when the customer receives the order item. So as you can see here, the goal of this process is to let the customer make the purchase and deliver the item. That's the goal of the process. But we may also have to think about what happens in the event when the payment is failed. What happens in the event when the quality check is failed, right? So these are known as exception scenarios where things don't go as per the plan, but we may have to still think about those additional steps. We must think about what should the process do, how should it behave in the event something doesn't go as per the plan, right? So let's get going with the tool. So I have Microsoft Visio. Now I'll go here and click on this stencil, the cross-functional flowchart. As you can see here, by default it's giving me a pool and a swim lane, in fact 2 swim lanes. So first thing you need to do is you need to go to the design, click on page setup, go to ledger, apply, okay. So what I'm doing here is I'm just trying to get some more real estate, more white space, so that I can have enough space to create my process model. So this one is my pool, and all I'm doing here is making some adjustments based on the size of the pool I need. The first thing you need to do is give a name to the process. So here, as I said, the goal is to process order. So let's give the name accordingly. So always verb noun, process order. That's the name of my process, which is on the top left side corner of this pool. These are my swim lanes. So depending on how many participants we have in the process, we will have those many swim lanes. So here we have customer, we have the order processing clerk, we have the bank, and we have the warehouse personnel. So we have 4 participants. That means we will need 4 swim lanes. So we have 2 of these here. So let's add 2 more. So all you have to do is click on this, drag it and drop it here. This tool will by default adjust your pool. So as you can see here, now we don't have enough space. So what I will do is I will squeeze in some of the pool, swim lanes to make space for the 4th one, and then let's see how it goes. Yeah, looks good. I can adjust now depending on my needs. And you can always, adjust the width of these pools, swim lanes, once you start modeling your flows. So let's get going. I think we should be good enough right now. So first thing is customer. So that's the first participant we have in the process. The second one is my order processing clerk. The next one is my bank. And the last one is the warehouse personnel. Right, so we have 4 swim lanes. Each participant will have its own swim lane. That means all the activity that is done by that participant must be contained within that swim lane. So the first step, we need to do the start event. That's when my process starts. So you label it accordingly. Start, that means the process starts. The first step or the first task that is being done by the customer is he or she fills out an order form. Right, so that's the task which is being done by the customer. Now I cannot have these 2 notations hanging in there without any connection. I need to connect them, and that's when I will go to home, click on connector, connect it. So that's my sequence flow. So this is connecting my start event with the first task, which is fill order form, and that's being done by the customer. So once the customer fills the order form, he or she will submit it. So that's again some action taken by the customer. So let's say we can say review form. We can add one more step here, review order form. And same thing, we'll connect these two. So I have fill order form. Once the customer fills the order form, he or she will review the order form, and then it goes to submit. Now I don't need these many spaces here, so I can squeeze in here. So you have to make some adjustments, keep making those adjustments as you go along, because you may need some space later in the process. Okay, once a customer submits an order form, it goes to the next step or the next participant, who is the order processing clerk, wherein he or she will check the order form. So again, some work is being done by this person. So check order form. And now you need to connect these two tasks, because once the customer completes the review, once he or she submits the order, the sequence comes to, the flow comes to this point, wherein the order processing clerk will start checking the order. Now really it doesn't matter whether you put this sequence flow like this or this. All it says is once the submission happens, the control of the flow or the control of the whole process comes to the order processing clerk, wherein he or she will check whether it's complete or incomplete. So the sequence of action, as you can see, is coming from customer to the order processing clerk. If you recollect, if the order processing clerk finds out any mistakes or any missing information in the order form, the form is sent back to the customer for him or her to update. So whenever you have something like if or check, that means you need to use gateway. So that's my gateway. Connect and give a label accordingly, order complete, and put a question mark. So we are saying, is this order complete? If yes, fine, we can go to the next step. If no, then we need to send this back to the customer, right? So we are saying here, so if the order is incomplete, we send it back to the customer and let the customer update it. Update order form. And here you will have to make a connection here to this step, because once the customer updates the form, we need to make them again review the order form, submit the order form, and the flow will continue from this point onwards, right? So make sure you give the label accordingly. So order form complete, no, that means it's incomplete. Only in that event we will take this path. Now let's suppose if the order form is complete, then we go to the next step, which is we notify the bank to debit the amount. So again, some work is being done by this person. Notify bank, and you can make it like this. And don't forget to add a label here. Just like we added a label here, we need to add a label here as well. Yes, order form is complete. So now the order processing clerk finds that the order is complete, and now they notify the bank. So now the control goes to the bank, wherein the bank will process the payment. So here I just want to add some more variation to it. We can use this task, that means some very atomic level activity which is being done by the bank, like filling out a form or submitting the payment, or some very specific which cannot be decomposed further. But if you think that this particular activity is a big task, it has got multiple steps involved, and you can decompose it into smaller steps, smaller components, then you can use this sub process, which is nothing but a collection of tasks. So only difference between this and this is that this is already broken down to the most finite level, whereas this one is a collection of multiple tasks, which is known as a sub process, which can be decomposed further. And I'll create one more session on explaining what is exactly a sub process and how to create one. But for now, it should be enough for us to go ahead with this scenario. All I'm saying is, let's connect the notify bank with this sub process, and we'll label it process payment. Now here I'm saying that if the bank is unable to make or unable to process the payment, what happens? What should we do? Right? So we have to take that scenario also into consideration. So again, whenever you have multiple outcomes, use the gateway and label it accordingly. So payment processed. If yes, we will go to the next step. If no, then we need to decide what we want to do. I mean, it all depends on the logic. If you think that if the payment is not processed, we abort the process, we terminate the process, that means we end the process. So we can do that depending on the logic you want to build. So let's keep it simple. So I'm saying if the payment is not processed, we will end the flow here. So we'll have to let me delete this here. Just reject order. So that's the logic we need to build, that in case if the payment is not processed, we will have to reject the order. And now let me add one more step here. I'm saying if the payment is not processed, notify customer that means the bank has to notify the customer that your payment failed, and after that we will reject the order. because the payment was not successfully made, of course we cannot complete the order unless you want to build a process wherein even if the customer is unable to make a payment, you let them give a second chance, or you want to give them another method of payment. You can build that logic as well depending on the logic you want to build, right? So here we are keeping it simple. If the payment fails, again make sure you put the label. So payment processed, no. Payment fails, notify the customer, reject the order. Now let's see what happens when the payment is processed successfully. So in that case, it goes to the warehouse personnel where he or she will pick the item, then he will perform a quality check. So again, whenever you have some work being done, use this task notation. Perform quality check. And don't forget to connect these. This one here. Yes. Payment complete. Right. So payment processed, yes. Now the flow comes to, or the control comes to warehouse personnel where he or she will pick the item, perform the quality check, and now as per the scenario, if you recollect, if the item is found defective, the warehouse personnel will pick another item and perform the same check. So that means whenever you have multiple outcomes like yes, no, true, false, or any other validations, you need to use the gateway. So quality check. You can label it like this. Item so like quality check, pass, fail, fail. Now here if it successfully completes a quality check, then we go to the next step. If it fails, we need to pick another item and perform the same thing. So here is a loop. If it fails, you bring the flow here and say quality check fail. And if it's found to be okay, if it passes the check, then we go to the next step. Right? If the quality check is a pass, then we go to the next step, which is pack the item and then ship the item. So here is the next step, which is what is that? Pack item. And then the next step is ship the item. And make sure you connect these. So only if the item is successfully um, you know if it passed this check, the quality check, only then you will take this flow. Otherwise you will take this flow which is quality check failed. Right, so pack the item, ship the item, and the customer gets the item. That means the item is shipped and delivered to the customer. So here is, now we need to think about, okay, do we need any confirmation or do we need any sort of acknowledgement from the customer that he or she has received the item? So if you want to build that logic, you will have to take the flow back into the customer lane, where you will say that acknowledge, or confirm receipt, confirm uh, receipt of order. Right, and you, of course, you'll have to connect these two. So make sure you connect this back into the customer swim lane, which is this one, and make sure you end your flow with an end event. Now here I can give end event like this, just label it accordingly, but always the best practice is to give an end event in its own distinct state. So I would put something like this: order received. Right here, same thing, I should label it accordingly: order rejected. And there you go. So if you see, we have the complete flow. Sorry, let me increase this. So as you can see here, now we have the complete process laid out. So the name of the process, we have the process participants, customer, order processing clerk, bank, and the warehouse personnel. We have the start event. In between we have all the tasks, all the sub process. We have the gateways. We have three gateways, in fact, 1, 2, and 3. That means any validations, any checkpoints, we'll use these gateways. And then we have the sequence flows. That means we need to connect two notations using these sequence flows. And one last thing, let's check if our process is complete and all the rules, everything is good, because sometimes we may think the process is complete and looks good, but somewhere the logic is broken, or not logic per se, but the syntax is incorrect. So if you go into process, you go to the check diagram, click on check diagram, and it will give you a message: if it's complete, no issues are found in the current document. That means everything looks good. Now let's suppose I delete this and run the check. It should give me an error saying this is hanging in there without any connection. Right, so all we have to do is connect these two and run the check and see what happens. Right, so that's a good feature. A lot of people don't know about this, but one thing, it's not going to check the logic of your flow. You may have a very bad logic, it's not going to check that. It's going to check the syntax. It's a syntax driven validation. Right, it's not going to check the logic. So make sure you think about the logic, right, when you are creating your process flow. This check is only to make sure that the syntax is followed. There are no errors with regards to the syntax. Okay, so that's the process, and hopefully this should help you creating your own process flow using your any tool using these basic notations. So that's all for now today, and I hope you enjoyed this session. And for all your training needs, please do call us on 703-200-9921 or email us back on info@skillcubator.com. Our website is www.skillcubator.com. Thank you and have a nice day. Bye bye.